This is a true story, and the HOA has long been a thorn in the side of the residents. Here's the full story.
They say every man needs to fight his battles, but sometimes the enemy comes wrapped in khakis, a clipboard, and an inflated sense of authority. They don't wield swords or muskets. They wield covenant clauses and arbitrary fines. This is the story of how my buddy Jack and I, along with a burgeoning band of weary neighbors, took a stand against the relentless, suffocating tyranny of HOA Karen, and won. Barely. The scars, though invisible, remain a testament to the skirmish. The initial attraction was undeniable. Jack and his wife, Sarah, had been searching for months. Their apartment felt like a cage. Their dreams of a garden, a grill, a little patch of earth to call their own felt increasingly out of reach in the brutal housing market. Then they found it, a charming, two-story colonial nestled on a street lined with mature oak trees, their branches forming a dappled canopy overhead. The lawns were immaculate, the flower beds vibrant, the houses painted in harmonious, muted tones. It whispered promises of quiet evenings, block parties, and the gentle rhythm of suburban life. It was, in a word, perfect. When Jack called me, his voice practically vibrated with excitement. "Dude, we found the place. It's incredible. Perfect size, great yard, top-rated schools if we ever go that route. Everything." Then came the caveat. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that it was part of a homeowners association. My blood ran cold. I'd heard the horror stories, seen the online forums filled with tales of petty regulations and power-tripping board members. HOAs, in my experience, were less about community enrichment and more about control, a voluntary surrender of property rights in exchange for, well, usually just the illusion of uniformity. I didn't hold back. "Jack, man, are you sure? HOAs are like mini dictatorships. You're signing up for headaches, for someone telling you what color your shutters can be, for fines over a misplaced garbage can. It's a gamble." He laughed, that easy, optimistic laugh that always characterized Jack. "Nah, it'll be fine. This one seems really well run. They just keep things looking nice, you know? Prevents the neighborhood from going downhill. Sarah likes the structure. Says it keeps property values up. Besides," he added, his voice softening, "this house, it feels like home. We're going for it." I sighed, a sense of foreboding settling in my gut. I wished them well, genuinely, but a knot of worry remained. They saw a haven. I saw a potential battleground disguised as a cul-de-sac. Moving day dawned bright and glorious. A Saturday morning, crisp and clear. The kind of day that feels like a fresh start. We were there, a crew of friends and family, unloading boxes, navigating furniture, the air filled with the hopeful chaos of new beginnings. To help with the process, Jack had rented one of those portable storage containers, a pod. It was dropped off in the driveway, a practical, albeit large, metal box designed to simplify the often harrowing logistics of moving. It was utilitarian, temporary, and, in our eyes, a lifesaver. It sat there, a necessary eyesore amidst the moving trucks and scattered boxes, through Saturday and into Sunday afternoon. We were taking a much-needed break, sprawled on the grass with cold drinks, surrounded by the remnants of packing tape and cardboard, when she appeared. You could spot her a mile away, a figure of purposeful, almost military precision. She moved with a stiff, self-important gait. Middle-aged, clad in an immaculately pressed polo shirt, was that a tiny embroidered HOA logo near the collar, pristine khaki capri pants, and sensible walking shoes. Sunglasses were perched atop her perfectly coiffed blonde bob like a conqueror's crown. And in one hand, clutched like a sacred text, was a neon pink clipboard, its contents seemingly holding the fate of the entire street. This was our introduction to HOA Karen. She didn't offer a neighborly wave, a welcoming smile, or even a simple hello. Her gaze was fixed, scanning the driveway, the house, the pod. Her lips were set in a thin line that hinted at disapproval, but her eyes, magnified slightly behind the sunglasses, held a gleam, the predatory glee light of someone who had found a target, a violation, a chance to exercise her small, tightly held sphere of influence. The faintest hint of a smile, Almost a smirk played on her lips. God. It was the smirk of someone who lived for this kind of petty power, who saw rule enforcement not as a necessary administrative task, but as a personal crusade. She didn't stop at the curb. She stomped with surprising energy straight up the driveway, bypassing the friends and family, her focus solely on Jack. She stopped about 5 feet from him, clipboard already flipped open, pen poised. Without preamble, without even the basic courtesy of making eye contact with the homeowner whose property she had just invaded, she began to write. "Mr. Henderson," she stated, her voice clipped and devoid of warmth, reading his name from the clipboard. "This storage container violates the Homeowners Association's aesthetic regulations concerning temporary structures visible from the street." Jack, caught completely off guard, stammered, "Oh, hi. We just moved in. It's a moving container, it's temporary. It'll be gone soon." I stepped forward, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder, trying to inject a little reason into the situation. "He's been here less than a week," I said, addressing Karen directly, forcing her to look at me. "Don't people get a warning first for something like this? Especially when they're literally in the middle of moving?" Karen's head snapped towards me. Her eyes, even behind the sunglasses, seemed to narrow. Her lips pursed so tight, I genuinely thought they might disappear, maybe even cause her head to implode under the pressure of her own indignation. She drew a sharp breath, clearly annoyed by the interruption, by the suggestion that her immediate finding power might have limitations. Reluctantly, and with an audible sniff of displeasure, she scratched out what she had written. In bold, angry letters, she wrote "Warning" across the violation line. "The container must be removed by end of day tomorrow," she stated, her voice colder than before. "Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $50, retroactive to today." $50 a day. For a box that was helping them move. Jack's face fell. The problem? The pod company, booked solid, couldn't guarantee pickup any earlier than Monday morning. A sinking feeling settled over us. True to her word, the pod was still there early Monday. The truck arrived around noon. And that evening, tucked into Jack's mailbox, was the first official correspondence from the HOA, a fine notice for $50. Before he'd even found where he packed the coffee maker, before the scent of fresh paint had faded, Jack had paid his first HOA tariff. I found him later that week, slumped on his back deck, staring glumly at the offending rectangle of concrete where the pod had sat. "Told you so, buddy," I said softly, not wanting to be preachy, but the words just came out. He didn't get angry. He just sighed a long, weary sound. "Yeah," he admitted. "You did. I didn't think it would be like this. It's just a box. A moving box." This initial skirmish, though seemingly minor, was the first crack in the veneer of neighborhood tranquility, the first hint of the relentless, soul-crushing bureaucracy that lay beneath the perfectly manicured lawns. It was a taste of Karen's power and a grim precursor of the battles to come. You'd think a $50 fine before the boxes were even unpacked would satisfy even the most zealous rule enforcer. But no. For Karen, it seemed Jack's very existence in the neighborhood was a potential violation waiting to happen. The pod incident was merely the opening salvo. The real war began subtly, insidious, a slow drip of petty regulations designed to wear down resistance. Within weeks, Jack and Sarah were receiving a steady stream of notices. Not fines yet, but warnings. Warnings about the height of their grass, a 1/4 inch over the prescribed 2 inches, about a single rogue dandelion spotted near the curb, about a welcome mat that was deemed inconsistent with neighborhood standards. Sarah, who had initially been the advocate for the HOA, now felt a growing unease. "It feels like we're being watched," she said, nervously straightening a garden gnome that had stood harmlessly by their porch for days before a notice arrived about unapproved exterior decor. The stress began to fray their nerves. Every time a car slowed in front of their house, they wondered if it was Karen on patrol. Leaving for work felt like escaping surveillance. Coming home felt like returning to a fishbowl. The joy of their new home was being slowly poisoned by this constant, low-grade anxiety. The next significant assault came during the satellite installation. In this era of streaming, a satellite dish felt almost archaic, but rural internet options were limited, and cable was prohibitively expensive. A satellite dish was the most reliable way to get decent TV and internet signal. Jack had scheduled a technician. Simple enough, right? The technician arrived, a friendly, no-nonsense guy named Mike. We were standing in the driveway, discussing the best placement for optimal signal. Mike pointed to the roof. Best spot is usually up there, get a clear shot at the southern sky. Just as Mike was getting his ladder out, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the street.
Karen.
Like a predator sensing weakness, she seemed to materialize whenever homeowners were attempting any form of exterior modification. This time, she wasn't just walking, she was striding with purpose, clipboard already deployed. "Stop right there," she barked, her voice carrying across the quiet morning air. Mike paused, looking confused. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Here we go," he muttered under his breath. Karen reached the driveway, planting herself firmly between Mike and the house. "You cannot install that satellite dish on the roof," she declared, pointing a rigid finger upwards. The Homeowners Association covenants require all satellite dishes to be installed in the backyard, hidden from view from the street. Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 7, she rattled off, as if citing a sacred decree. Mike, a seasoned installer, frowned. "Ma'am, usually we put them where they get the best signal. The backyard might have tree obstructions. Or the house itself could block the signal." "That is not my concern," Karen stated imperiously. "The aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood is paramount. The dish must be in the backyard. No exceptions." Jack tried to reason with her. "Karen, if the signal is bad in the back, we won't be able to watch TV. We need this for internet access too. It's how Sarah works from home sometimes." Karen was unmoved. "Those are personal issues, Mr. Henderson. The rules are clear. Backyard installation only. I will be monitoring. A fine will be issued if installation proceeds on the roof or in the front." Defeated, weary, and not wanting another fine stacked on top of the pod one, which he was still smarting over, Jack reluctantly told Mike to try the backyard. Mike, shaking his head at the absurdity, moved his equipment to the back deck. The installation was completed, the dish tucked away beside a rose bush. And the reception? Terrible. Beyond terrible. It was infuriatingly inconsistent. Picture buffering for 5 minutes just to load a cooking video. Streaming a movie was an exercise in patience that usually ended in frustrated surrender. Sarah's work video calls constantly froze or dropped. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It was impacting their lives, their ability to relax, Sarah's ability to work efficiently. Jack called me that evening, his voice thick with frustration and despair. "I can't take this, man. We moved here for peace, and it's been nothing but stress and ridiculous rules. Now our internet barely works because Karen decided where a dish has to go. It's insane." Listening to him, I felt a familiar surge of anger. This wasn't just petty. It felt fundamentally wrong. HOAs had rules, yes, but they couldn't override everything. I knew enough about property rights to suspect this satellite dictate wasn't legal. "Hold on, Jack," I said. "Don't just accept this. I think I know who to call." I immediately rang up our buddy Liam. Liam wasn't just a lawyer. He was the kind of lawyer who genuinely believed in justice, especially when it came to fighting corporate bullies or, in this case, bureaucratic bullies. He had a sharp mind, a dry wit, and a deep-seated hatred for petty tyranny in all its forms. I explained the situation, the pod fine, the constant warnings, the satellite dish placement mandated by Karen, and the resulting terrible reception. Liam listened patiently, the only sounds on his end the occasional tap of keys as he presumably looked something up. "Okay, hold the phone right there," Liam finally said, his voice calm but firm. "Satellite dishes. There's a federal rule on this. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. They have regulations specifically about over-the-air reception devices, which includes satellite dishes. The rule basically says HOAs cannot prevent you from installing a dish or dictate its placement if it impairs reception or increases the cost of installation. They can have reasonable aesthetic guidelines, but they cannot prohibit placement necessary for reception. No way can she force him to put it somewhere it doesn't work just because she doesn't like seeing it. Federal law supersedes HOA rules on this. Liam's words were like a jolt of electricity. Federal law. This wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was potentially a legal battle with solid ground to stand on. We weren't just fighting Karen. We were fighting her overreach with the backing of Uncle Sam. We smelled blood in the water. The passive acceptance, the weary compliance, it evaporated in that instant. It was time to stop reacting and start acting. It was time to plan our counterattack. Over beers and burgers at my place that weekend, we convened the War Council. Jack, Sarah, me, and Liam, armed with printouts of FCC regulations. The mood had shifted from despair to cautious determination. Okay, the satellite dish is our leverage, Liam explained, spreading the FCC documents on the table. Karen's rule violates federal law. Period. We can force her to back down on this and maybe, just maybe, use it as a crack to widen and challenge her other tactics. Jack recounted his conversation with Mike, the installer. Mike said the absolute best reception would be with a pole-mounted dish, dead center in the front yard. Said he could get a totally unobstructed view. At the time, Jack had dismissed it as unthinkable, given the HOA rules. But now? Now, armed with Liam's knowledge and his own simmering resentment, the idea didn't seem so crazy. It seemed strategic, and maybe just a little bit gloriously defiant. Jack hesitated for a moment, picturing the neighborhood's pristine lawns. A pole in the front yard? It went against every fiber of his rule-abiding nature. But then he thought about the constant fines, the sleepless nights, Sarah's stress, the buffering TV screen. He thought about the feeling of being powerless in his own home. Liam saw the hesitation. Jack, he said, his voice firm but encouraging. This isn't about being obnoxious for the sake of it. It's about asserting your rights. The law says you can put it where it works. If that's the front yard, that's the front yard. And honestly, making it visible sends a message. It shows you know your rights and you're not backing down. Do it, Liam said, his eyes meeting Jack's. And make it impossible to miss. A slow grin spread across Jack's face. It wasn't his usual easy smile. This was a different kind of grin. The grin of a man about to reclaim his territory, the grin of someone about to make HOA history in the most literal, in-your-face way possible. The following Saturday dawned bright and beautiful, the kind of day that usually lulled the neighborhood into a sense of peaceful conformity. But today felt different. There was an undercurrent of nervous energy, at least within our small group. We had planned carefully. To mask the deliberate provocation as normal activity, we decided to host a moving-in barbecue. It wasn't just for show. We invited friends, family, and even extended tentative invitations to the neighbors we had met briefly. We wanted witnesses. We wanted a crowd. The grill was fired up, the smell of charcoal and burgers filling the air. Kids were running around, laughter echoed through the yard. A few neighbors, curious about the new folks and perhaps drawn by the smell of food, hesitantly wandered over. Sarah was a natural hostess, putting people at ease, introducing herself and Jack. Amidst the normalcy of a Saturday barbecue, the stage was being set for something entirely abnormal in this meticulously controlled environment. Around mid-morning, the satellite installer, Mike, arrived, looking slightly confused by the festive atmosphere. Didn't realize it was a party, he said, smiling faintly. Just a little something, Jack replied, a twinkle in his eye. Ready to try that other spot? Wherever you say, boss, Mike said, still wiping burger grease from his hands. Got my level, got my tools. Jack grinned. Great. Follow me. He led Mike towards the garage. And then he produced it. From the depths of the garage, Jack, with a dramatic flourish, rolled out a pole. But not just any pole. This was a 12-foot, heavy-duty, 6-by-6 pole barn post. And it wasn't a subtle shade of brown or green. Oh no. Jack, on Liam's subtly mischievous advice, make it impossible to miss, had painted it the most obnoxiously bright, eye-searing shade of safety orange he could find. It glowed. It vibrated with color. It practically screamed rebellion against the beige conformity that defined the neighborhood's aesthetic. Mike's eyes widened. He looked from the glowing orange monolith to Jack, then back to the pole. That's the pole?" "That's the pole," Jack confirmed, his grin widening. "Going right out front. Dead center." Mike, after a moment of stunned silence, just shrugged and grabbed his tools. "Alrighty then. Never installed one quite like it, but hey, you're the customer." Jack had already marked the spot, a perfect circle spray-painted on his otherwise flawless front lawn, equidistant from the curb and the front door, centered beneath the widest expanse of open sky. With surprising speed, Jack and Mike started digging. The shovel bit into the earth, upturning dark soil onto the bright green grass. It felt symbolic, breaking the perfect surface. They dug a deep, wide hole. Then, with some effort, they hoisted the massive orange pole and maneuvered it into position. Jack held it plumb while Mike mixed the quick-set concrete. They poured it in, bracing the pole, ensuring it stood perfectly straight, a tall, slender, incredibly orange monument rising from the suburban earth. The sight was arresting. You could not see it. It was a vibrant exclamation point in a paragraph of muted tones. We knew she would come. We just didn't know how fast. We didn't have to wait long. Less than 10 minutes after the concrete was poured and Mike started climbing the pole with the dish mount, the air shifted. The barbecue sound seemed to quiet slightly. A collective, almost palpable tension rippled through the small crowd of neighbors and friends. There she was, at the end of the street, like a character entering stage right. Karen. She had clearly been alerted, or perhaps she simply possessed an uncanny sixth sense for when a homeowner dared to deviate from the approved script. This time, her stride wasn't just purposeful, it was laced with indignation. Her face, even from a distance, looked set in thunderous disapproval. As she got closer, we could see the familiar neon pink clipboard in one hand. In the other, her cell phone held up horizontally recording. She was documenting the transgression, building her case, starring in her own personal reality show titled HOA Wars, The Henderson Heresy. She didn't slow down. She marched directly onto Jack's front yard, stopping right beside the base of the gloriously orange pole. Mike paused his work halfway up, looking down with a mixture of amusement and trepidation. "Mr. Henderson." Karen's voice was shrill, amplified by her fury. "What do you think you are doing?" Jack walked over, a calm counterpoint to her histrionics. "Good morning, Karen. We're installing our satellite dish." "On a pole." "In the front yard," she shrieked, gesturing wildly at the orange monstrosity. "This is a gross violation of the covenants. It is unsightly. It is unacceptable. We need it here for reception," Jack said, keeping his voice even. "The covenants state backyard installation only," she screeched, flipping open her clipboard, pen already scratching furiously. Section 4, subsection B, paragraph 7. "You will cease this installation immediately and remove this eyesore. I am issuing a massive fine. $50 for the unapproved structure. $50 for failure to install in the backyard. $100 for general aesthetic violation." The neighbors watched, some with wide eyes, others with thinly veiled smiles. Our friends exchanged nervous glances. The air crackled. "I'm also contacting the authorities," Karen announced, pulling out her other phone and starting to dial. "This is a disturbance. He's digging holes. He's putting up unauthorized structures. This is a code violation." This was the moment we'd planned for. As Karen spoke frantically into her phone, apparently trying to get the local police involved in a dispute over a satellite pole, Liam, who had been standing back near the grill, calmly walked forward. He was dressed casually, but he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who held a trump card. He reached Karen as she was finishing her call, holding out the freshly scrawled fine notice towards Jack. Liam smoothly, almost gently, took the fine notice from Karen's hand. Karen blinked, momentarily stunned by his audacity. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Liam O'Connell," Liam said, his voice low and clear, easily cutting through Karen's fading hysteria. I'm Mr. Henderson's attorney. Karen visibly stiffened. Attorney? This is an HOA matter, not a legal one. Liam gave her a cool, unimpressed look. Actually, Karen, he said, holding up the fine notice. Then, with deliberate slowness, he tore the paper precisely in half. And then in half again. He let the pieces flutter to the perfectly manicured grass at her feet. A gasp went through the small crowd. Karen's jaw dropped. Mr. Henderson is installing his satellite dish in the location required to obtain a usable signal, Liam stated, his voice gaining authority. This is his right under federal law, specifically the FCC's over-the-air reception devices rule. Your HOA covenants, insofar as they prohibit or impair this installation or mandate a location that prevents reception, are superseded by federal law. He paused, letting that sink in. Karen's face was turning a truly remarkable shade of red. Furthermore, Liam continued, gesturing to the orange pole, the FCC rule allows for necessary structures to support the dish. This pole is necessary for optimal signal. Its color, while perhaps not to your personal taste, is not something your HOA can prohibit if its purpose is solely to obtain clear reception where other locations are insufficient. He took a step closer to Karen, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious. Let me be perfectly clear, Karen. If you attempt to interfere with this installation, if you damage this property, or if you issue any more fines related to the placement or existence of this satellite dish and its supporting structure, you and the Homeowners Association will be facing a federal lawsuit for violating Mr. Henderson's rights under the Telecommunications Act. And just for the record, he added, glancing at her phone, calling the police to interfere with a federally protected activity could potentially lead to other complications for the HOA. My advice? Stand down. Karen sputtered. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her carefully constructed facade of authority crumbled under the weight of federal law and lawsuit. The police car she had summoned arrived at the end of the street just then, the officer looking utterly bewildered by the scene. A group of people, a barbecue, a man on a pole, and a woman in khakis standing over torn paper, looking like she was about to explode. The officer, sensing this was not a domestic disturbance or a robbery, but something far more bizarre involving regulations, wisely stayed in his car, observing. Defeated, cornered, and without a rulebook clause to defend her, Karen let out a frustrated, inarticulate sound, something between a gasp and a squawk, glared daggers at Jack, Liam, and the offending orange pole, spun on her heel, and retreated as quickly as she had arrived. A collective breath was released. Mike finished installing the dish. Jack looked at the orange pole, then at Sarah, then at me, then at Liam. He let out a shaky laugh, which quickly turned into a full-blown, relieved guffaw. The neighbors who were present slowly started clapping. Tentatively at first, then louder. A few came over, their faces beaming. Finally, one older gentleman exclaimed. Someone stood up to her. The orange pole stood tall and proud, a monument to defiance against petty rule. But the battle, we knew, wasn't truly over. Karen was defeated in this skirmish, but her capacity for making life miserable was legendary. Karen's retreat from the front yard confrontation was not a surrender, it was a tactical withdrawal. She couldn't attack the orange pole directly, but she had 1,000 other arrows in her quiver, all meticulously catalogued in her neon-pink clipboard. The weeks that followed were a barrage. If she couldn't find him for the satellite, she would find him for everything else. Jack's mailbox was deemed, not the approved shade of colonial blue. A small, tasteful bird bath Sarah had placed in a flower bed was hit with a garden decor unsightly violation. A group of our friends gathered for a casual Saturday evening grill-out. An unauthorized gathering exceeding quiet enjoyment parameters fine-landed in the mailbox. The grass, no matter how often Jack mowed, was always magically too tall the day after. The fines arrived with relentless frequency, each notice a little jab, a reminder that Karen was still watching, still determined to make their lives miserable. It was harassment, pure and simple, designed to wear them down, to bleed them financially, to make them regret ever challenging her. Jack, following Liam's advice, didn't pay them. Each fine notice was scanned and emailed to Liam. Liam didn't just ignore them, he responded. Not with checks, but with formal, increasingly stern letters on his law firm's letterhead. Each letter cited the pattern of harassment, referenced the previous confrontation regarding the federally protected satellite dish, and explicitly stated that continuation of this behavior would result in further legal action, potentially including a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and malicious harassment. The legal battle was quieter than the front yard showdown, fought with paper and postage rather than shouts and glaring orange. But it was just as stressful. The pile of unpaid fines grew on Jack's counter. The stack of Liam's legal letters grew in a separate folder. The air in Jack and Sarah's house remained thick with tension. But something else was happening, something Karen hadn't anticipated. The dramatic confrontation on the front lawn, the sight of the orange pole, and Karen's subsequent, almost comical retreat had been a catalyst. The neighbors who had witnessed it talked. The story spread like wildfire through the quiet street, whispered over fences and during dog walks. For years, Karen had ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist and a seemingly endless supply of rules. Small infractions, trivial deviations. She had fined people for leaving trash cans out for an extra hour, for having slightly chipped paint on a window frame, for kids leaving toys on the lawn overnight. Many neighbors had grumbled, felt resentful, but few had dared to openly defy her. The risk of fines of being targeted was too high. They lived in a state of quiet, simmering resentment. Jack's stand changed that. The orange pole wasn't just a satellite mount, it was a symbol of defiance, a flag planted in the ground saying, "Enough." Neighbors started noticing the barrage of fines Jack was receiving, the constant stream of envelopes from the HOA office delivered to his door. They saw the legal letters tacked to his door frame, a passive-aggressive move by Karen's allies, no doubt. They saw the stress etched on Jack and Sarah's faces. And they saw the orange pole, still standing, defiant and bright. It was a constant, visual reminder that someone had fought back and the sky hadn't fallen. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, neighbors started approaching Jack and Sarah. Conversations began quietly, often in hushed tones near the curb or over the back fence. "Heard about the fine for your mailbox, Jack? Unbelievable. Mine's probably next." "Sarah, we got a warning about our bird feeder last week. Karen said it attracts undesirable wildlife." Shared grievances fostered a sense of solidarity. The quiet resentment started to boil over into open discontent. Jack and Sarah weren't alone. They were just the first to draw the line in the sand. The small acts of defiance began. A few neighbors, emboldened, stopped mowing their lawns with military precision on the exact schedule dictated by the HOA calendar. Their grass stayed a little longer, a rebellious shagginess creeping in. Someone painted their mailbox not colonial blue, but a cheerful, bright red. Another put out a couple of quirky flamingo lawn ornaments. The "Welcome to Freedom" banner, hand-painted and hung proudly between two trees, appeared across the street from Karen's house. The neighborhood, once meticulously, uniformly pristine, started looking, well, more lived in, more individual, more human. And, paradoxically, the people in it seemed happier, lighter. The shared struggle against Karen's tyranny was forging a sense of community that the HOA's rigid rules never could. Block party invitations appeared in mailboxes, not HOA-sanctioned ones, but spontaneous gatherings organized by neighbors eager to connect, to share stories, and to quietly, or not so quietly, commiserate about Karen. Meanwhile, Liam was doing his work. He didn't just fight the fines. He went after the source of Karen's power, the HOA's founding documents, its bylaws, its articles of incorporation. He pored over decades of minutes from board meetings, searching for procedural errors, inconsistencies, anything that could dismantle her authority. His persistence paid off. Late one evening, Liam called Jack, his voice excited. "Jack, I found it." "Found what?" Jack asked, weary from another day of Karen-induced stress. "The loophole," Liam said triumphantly. In the original articles of incorporation, buried deep in the legalese, It states that for any significant financial action, including the enforcement of monetary fines, requires a supermajority vote of the entire HOA board. Not just a simple majority, but a supermajority. And here's the kicker. The section detailing the fine structure and enforcement procedures was added later, but it references the original supermajority requirement. They've been issuing and enforcing fines for years without actually having the required votes documented in their minutes. It was a technicality, a bureaucratic oversight, but it was a powerful one. Karen and her small clique on the board had been operating as if a simple majority was enough. But the founding documents said otherwise. Without a supermajority vote explicitly recorded for each fine structure or enforcement action, none of their recent fines, including all of Jack's, were legally enforceable. This was the key. Karen's power relied entirely on the threat and enforcement of fines. If she couldn't enforce them, she was toothless. Jack and Sarah, armed with this crucial information and with Liam's guidance, didn't immediately confront Karen. Instead, Sarah took the lead on a grassroots campaign. She printed flyers, clear and concise, explaining the supermajority requirement and how it affected the validity of recent fines. She and Jack, along with a few newly supportive neighbors, distributed them to every house in the association. The effect was immediate and profound. Neighbors, armed with legal knowledge and emboldened by Jack's visible defiance, started challenging the fines they had received. They referenced the supermajority rule. They demanded proof of the required votes in board meeting minutes. Karen and her clique were exposed. They couldn't produce the documentation. Their authority, built on a foundation of fear and a procedural oversight, crumbled. The next HOA meeting was eventful. The usual tense atmosphere was replaced by a palpable sense of rebellion. Neighbors, usually silent, stood up and demanded answers. They questioned the fines. They questioned the board's authority. They questioned Karen's leadership. The orange pole, though not present, felt like an unseen force in the room, a silent witness to the shifting power dynamics. Karen tried to bluster, to cite other rules, but she was facing a united front armed with legal facts. Her support on the board, always based more on fear than genuine respect, evaporated under pressure from the community. Without the supermajority votes, the fines were null and void. Her reign of petty terror was effectively over. She resigned from the board shortly after, citing lack of community support, a euphemism for being utterly defeated. The immediate aftermath wasn't a sudden, dramatic movie ending. It was a slow exhale, a gradual easing of tension. The fines stopped arriving. The oppressive feeling of being watched began to dissipate. The neighbors, now connected by their shared experience, continued to build their community, planning informal gatherings, looking out for each other. The HOA didn't disappear entirely. Necessary functions, landscaping of common areas, pool maintenance, continued, albeit under new, less tyrannical leadership. The rules still existed, but they were applied with common sense and neighborly discretion, not wielded as weapons of control. And the orange pole? It still stands. Years later, long after the memory of the intense conflict has softened around the edges, that unapologetically bright, 12-foot, 6-by-6 pole barn post remains firmly cemented in Jack's front yard. It's become a landmark, a conversation starter, a legend whispered to new residents moving into the neighborhood. Every spring, Jack gives it a fresh coat of that same vibrant safety orange paint. It gleams in the sunlight, a beacon of resistance, a middle finger, albeit a polite, pole-shaped one, to petty tyranny. It's not just a satellite mount anymore. It's a symbol of standing up for your rights, of community found in shared struggle, and of the fact that even the most intimidating authority can be challenged and defeated. And every time we gather at Jack and Sarah's place for a barbecue, which happens frequently now, with laughter echoing freely and no fear of unauthorized gathering fines, I look at that orange pole, silhouetted against the setting sun, and I raise my beer to Jack. I raise it to Jack, the quiet man who just wanted a home, but found himself on the front lines of a suburban war. I raise it to Sarah, who supported him, fought alongside him, and helped rally the neighborhood. I raise it to Liam, the legal eagle who proved that knowledge of the law, combined with a willingness to fight, is a powerful weapon. I raise it to the neighbors, who found their voices and their unity in the face of oppression. And I raise it to the orange pole itself, that simple, absurd, glorious structure that became the unlikely standard of rebellion. It serves as a constant, bright reminder that sometimes when the world gets petty, when authority overreaches, you have to get a little petty right back. That the law, when on your side, is one hell of a weapon. And that the greatest defense against tyranny, whether in khakis or a crown, is finding your voice and standing together. Stay strong, friends. Know your rights. And never, ever underestimate the power of a well-placed, strategically painted orange pole.